I've learned through everything that no matter what our circumstances, that God is faithful and we can trust him with all of our circumstances and everything that we're going through. One of the things that I've learned is that God may not take us out of the situation that we're in, but he'll always give us what we need to get through it. And that kind of brings us to what we're going to talk about tonight, and that is Psalm 121. That's my favorite psalm and probably one of my favorite passages in the Bible. I think most of us have that go-to verse if we're discouraged or down or we need a little encouragement, a particular verse that we go when we listen to or read. But for me, my go-to passage is Psalm 121. It's part of a group of songs called the Psalms of Ascent. And the reason being is that when the Jewish people would take their pilgrimage to Jerusalem every year, there is a band of mountains around Jerusalem, and the pilgrims had to go over these mountains. They had to climb the mountains, and it was a dangerous journey. So whether it be the physicality of climbing the mountains or just the threat of bandits or thieves attacking them, it was a dangerous situation for them. So in this particular psalm, the psalmist is looking to these mountains and he's saying, where does my help come from? So we're going to take a look at these sweet 8 little verses in Psalm 121, and I'm going to read it to you guys real quick out of the in New Living Translation, NLT. One quick note, if you guys don't have the YouVersion Bible app, you should definitely go ahead and download it. There's just tons of translations, and you can read verses in different translations until you understand what God's trying to say in that particular passage. There's devotions, there's study guides, and it's just a definite handy little tool to have on your phone. And it's free. You can't beat free. So let's take a look at the first 2 verses. The first 2 verses are the ones that people quote the most. People use them like a quick little prayer when they need just to reach out real quick. And usually they're the ones that people memorize, are those first 2. But I look up to the mountains. Does my help come from there? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. The psalmist is being honest about his fears. He's afraid. He's getting ready to climb this mountain and he's scared, and some of us are scared right now. We've got a mountain around us right now that we're not sure what to do with. But if you look in the following verses, we see that the answer comes there. Our help comes from the Lord. So no matter what our circumstance, that's where our help comes from. And so as we live out this unusual season and time of life, we don't have to be fearful, because the one who made the mountains is the one who made this season of life that we're in. And he is the one in control. See, God operates outside of time. So he's already through on the other side of this situation. He's already there at the end. He knows what's going to happen. And like I said earlier, he may not take you out of a tough situation that you're in, but he'll always get you through it. And he will give us what we need to get through this situation too. So in verse 2, my help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. We need to remember that no matter what we face, God is the creator, the maker and the creator of this universe. And he holds the power to deal with everything. Any challenge we face, he holds the power of that situation. When the psalmist felt threatened by danger, he lifted his eyes to the mountains and beyond, to the one who created the mountains. So the question, like I said in verse 1, is answered in the following verses. So let's take a quick look at 3 and 4. He will not allow your foot to slip. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. So I don't know if you guys have had a problem with sleeping during this time, but sometimes when we get anxious or afraid and we are dealing with a tough situation, it's hard to sleep. And sometimes we lay there and all these scenarios run through our heads, and we try to figure it all out by ourselves. And sometimes we can't do that. And I think what we need to remember is that we can go to sleep knowing that God is awake. God doesn't sleep. He doesn't nap. He doesn't fall asleep on the job. He's awake when we sleep. And so when we find ourselves in the middle of a difficult situation, we know that we can go to sleep because God is with us. King David said in Psalm 4:8, in peace I will both lie down and sleep, because you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. And that's so peaceful to think, oh, I can dwell in safety because God is watching over me. He's not going to fall asleep on me. All right, so verses 5 and 6, we're trucking right through this, guys. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun will not smite you by day, nor the moon by night. We're going to have a little fun with this part. Of course, we know that God can protect us from the elements, and he can protect us from sunstroke and moonstroke. Did you know that was a thing? The ancients actually thought that you could go crazy from moonstroke, and that lunatic comes from the word luna, or moon. And so being out in the moon could make you go crazy. Verse 6, it defines the scope of God's protective care. It continues both day and night. And this is really neat. Hebrew literature, they would use opposites to explain the gravity or the value of something. And so in this, they would say sun and moon, or day and night. And God covers each end of that spectrum and everything in between. So God stands ready to protect us around the clock. Then in verse 7, it says, the Lord will protect you from all evil. He will keep your soul. And we have to remember that being a believer doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have a comfortable life. It doesn't make us rich or drive the fanciest car or have the most iPhone. But what it means is that he will protect our soul. He will guide us and strengthen us and encourage us and lift us up in those times if we will trust him in those situations. The word all in that verse stresses the fullness of God's protection to us. And then in verse 8, the Lord will guard your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore. There's an old theologian, his name was C.J. Spurgeon, and he commented, and he said this: none are so safe as those whom God keeps, none so much in danger as the self-secure. See, people who think that they don't need God, that they can do it all by themselves, that's foolish. They find out real quick that that's not the case. Hebrews 15:5, Jesus said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. He will never abandon you. So my mom always said this: God said it, I believe it, and that settles it. And we can really, the fact of God's never-ending care inspires confidence in us, and we can hold on to that and believe it. I would encourage you this week to think about that. If you get afraid or you get uncomfortable, if you hear the news, it will make you uncomfortable. Just remember, where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. So he already made this. He's already got this, and we just have to trust him in it.
No, that's so good. I appreciate your just breaking down that passage for us. I think, thank you for kind of putting in context, like what it means. Like, I know I hear that verse all the time of like, I look to the hills or the mountains and where does my help come from? And it's like, why, like, why are we looking to the mountains? But it's really, you helped us understand, like, it's a specific situation. When he says he's looking to the mountains, he's looking to this terrible trip that he has coming up that's dangerous. And so I even think I'm a big fan of just trying to, like, how do we rewrite the verse, like, for us? It's like, instead of mountains, it's whatever that thing is that we're going through. So like, how do I look towards school online? How do I look towards COVID-19? How do I look towards, my relationship with my parents? And then it's like a comma, and then it's, where does my help come from? It comes from God. And so I think, thanks for, explaining that to us. I hope that kind of helps us as we hear people quote that verse, because we do, like you said, all the time, to kind of remember, oh, like, this is exactly what that means. It's when I'm in this situation, where does my help come from? Do you have any, like, couple practical ways of, like, how do we remember to focus on God instead of focusing on maybe that situation that we're going through or the things that are stressing us out? How are some ways that we can focus on God instead of focusing on those things?
I'll tell you what I always did with my sons growing up. One is a kids pastor now, and one's in the Navy, and he's out in a ship in the middle of the ocean. I taught them this silly little thing, and I would just look at them and say, how do you eat an elephant? And that sounds so weird, but what we did, we would break it down, each little piece of what we're dealing with. each step by step, and we would point it back to scripture and to God. And I used to tell them, I don't care if you're tying your shoes, doing your homework, or doing your chores, you do it as if you're doing it for Christ. And so in any situation, when you're dealing with something tough, break it down, get it into small pieces, manageable pieces, and then look to God for each of your answers, and have some go-to scriptures. Like I go to Psalm 121, but have a list of those that you can go to, and it'll help you break it down.
As we close then, is there any specific challenge or thing that we can just do this week in reference to kind of just what you're talking about and Psalm 121 that we're like, hey, we've got a little more time on our hands? Either a verse we should read or a prayer we should pray, or just what would be kind of something we can keep doing this week to build on this?
I'd say maybe try to memorize those first 2 verses so that you can challenge yourself. If you feel yourself getting anxious or agitated, turn it around and say, look at whatever your issue is and replace it with mountain, and then say, oh, my help comes from the Lord. But if you can remember those first 2 scriptures, it'll help with that.